Hello, how's it going? Welcome to my review. Today we are going to be reviewing Legend of the Galactic Heroes Volume 1, Dawn. This book was released in 1986, and you may be familiar with it because there's actually multiple anime adaptations. I think there's one going on right now. So I am just going to be looking at the book. I have seen the first episode of the show, but nothing else of it, so I'm really just going off the original text for this review. Now, this book was released in 1986. It is authored by Yoshiki Tanaka, and it is translated by Daniel Huddleston. So, obviously it was originally written in Japanese, and it has been translated to English, and I will get to the pros and cons of that in just a moment. But for the genre of the book, this is military science fiction. And for those of you looking for a very grounded, realistic take on sci-fi, this is really not going to be it. This book is more about the tactics and battle strategy, as well as the overall societal changes that happen in this universe that is set up. However, there are elements of realism insofar as things are explained. For example, they explain the time system and how different planets work around having to have a unified time system. They still keep like months and years that we have, even though this takes place like 1,500 years in the future. They still have like March, April, May months, which was a little off-putting, but not really a big deal. And as I said, this is military science fiction, so what that means is that all the battles that happen are very top level. So battles are described from a position of where the fleets are and how they interact with one another, and it's not so much about the ship-to-ship combat and how each battle progresses. It's more about the overall state of the battle from the commander's perspective. You know, if this was turned into a video game, I would assume it'd have to be a real-time strategy game where you like move units around and stuff. So for basic background of the synopsis, I'm not going to get into spoilers, but basically it is about these two warring factions in, I believe, around the year like 3,500 or something like that. And that is the Galactic Empire, which is described as being founded on kind of somewhat fascist ideals, but at the time the story starts, it's a bit more decrepit with age and corrupt and all that. And the Free Planets Alliance, which is democracy, which was founded supposedly on the ideals of freedom and individuality, but once the story starts, it is very like decrepit in its old ways and in need of reform. And that's actually one of the things I really liked about the story, was that it resisted the urge to make one side all good and the other side all bad. Both sides really do have lots of problems internally and structurally, and I'm really glad they addressed that. They really went more in on the Free Planets Alliance side of that spectrum, and the Galactic Empire, it's kind of just stagnant in its old ways. We actually don't see as much of what normal life is like for the Galactic Empire, but we do see that for the Free Planets Alliance, and we kind of get to see how, you know, the corruption is affecting the lives of citizens. And that's really one of the major themes, is that there is no real good or evil in the world, and history is a big basis for this book, which I really like. I thought that was really cool. But there's also a third faction, which is Fezzen, which is kind of like the trading capital that trades with both sides. That's like somewhat powerful, but not as powerful as the two main factions. We don't get a lot of them in this book, but since this is the first book in a series of 10, I am assuming that they explore that further, because they do seem to be a pivotal part in the story. We just don't see a lot of them. And that's another thing I want to mention. I am only reviewing the first book of this series, but there are supposed to be 10 novels, and they actually originally were not released in English when they were originally released, and only now they're just getting around to them. I believe they're on book 8 or 9, and the 10th is supposed to come out in the near future. But anyway, like I said, there are two factions, and in each of those factions we have one of the protagonists, so we kind of have a dual protagonist system. For the Galactic Empire, we have Reinhardt, the Golden Brat, as he's referred to as, and on the Free Planets Alliance, we have Yang Wen Li, who is a lot more, I guess, humble, and just kind of an average citizen who kind of works his way up. And what I really like is how the book goes to great lengths to describe how both of these men are extremely intelligent on the battlefield and really good commanders. However, the interesting thing is they both treat their intellect and their position very differently. You learn very quickly that Reinhardt's goals are ultimately to become an emperor and kind of the ruler of all, because he sees himself as I guess superior in a way, or just like fit to rule. But it's not really in the same way that the negative side of the Galactic Empire goes about it. At the beginning, it shows that it was kind of founded on like genetic superiority and such, and then Reinhardt explicitly denounces that in his thoughts that we see in the book. So he's definitely a unique figure within the Galactic Empire, and the same goes for Yang, who is more, just kind of doing his job, and he sees himself more as a surveyor of history, not a creator of it. And I thought that was a really interesting thing. What am I looking for? Position to take for that, like an interesting way to explore that concept. So we see them kind of clash with their forces, but they both treat them very differently, and some have more command than others. And one of the things we see is that Yang might be more successful if he were given the autonomy that Reinhardt was, and that's a very interesting concept, and I think that's explored very well. This book is also really good at world building. Sometimes at the expense of the plot, it'll go off in tangents describing how things are explained, like I said, the day-night cycle and 24-hour days and 365-day years and all that. But it's really interesting, and it does reference past historical events as precedent, which I thought is really cool because it's kind of like transplanting that to the future. It's very like classical warfare-y. It's not really changed by the presence in space as much as there's just a few more science fiction elements. They're really more like battleships in space, kind of like, think Star Wars or something like that, very like classically themed. Now, I just want to talk about the writing of her a little bit, and this is actually the area where I think this book struggles the most. Unfortunately, because it was originally written in Japanese and translated into English, there are some points where the writing comes off as a bit clunky, and I'm not trying to criticize the translator. I'm sure he did a phenomenal job, and obviously I don't speak Japanese, so I can't really complain about it. However, there are moments where the writing is a bit unclear, and I'm not actually sure what transpired. That might just be on my part, but I do believe that the writing does not lend itself super well to clarity, unfortunately. And another thing that goes along with this is there are lightning fast transitions in this book. Like within a paragraph, you might switch perspectives once or even twice, and that can be a little confusing at times, especially since a lot of the transitions, they are from character to character, POV to POV, but between those it also transitions to an omniscient view, like when it's explaining kind of topography or how things work. And in those sequences, we don't get them from the perspective of the characters themselves. It's more from the kind of God view, if you will. And this could be a little disorienting, as you would go from top level view of like, here's how the science works and here's how ships work, to a character's inner thoughts and monologues. And that created a little bit of a disconnect, but it also allowed to explain a lot of the things going on, and it made the world more interesting because a lot of the world building in here is very interesting. I just think those transitions could have been handled a little bit better. So that's really all I have to say for this book. My overall recommendation would be the story is really engaging, I think. The one big problem from the overall narrative standpoint is obviously that it is not really a self-contained story. It is the first part of a long series. I mean, it's called Dawn, which kind of implies that it's more of the starting chapter. The last chapter of this book is actually called A New Prologue, which kind of implies that this is just kind of like setting everything up. And it does leave in an interesting place. And I am considering to read more of the books, and if I do, I will certainly make a review to let you, the audience, know. But something that I do need to mention before I can wholeheartedly recommend this book is that there are some issues with the writing that can be a little bit tough to navigate. Sometimes you have to really kind of like pay attention to the words and focus on what you're reading. But other than that, the story is very good, and it's a really short book too. This is popularly known as a light novel in Japan. It's less than 300 words. It's a perfect summer read. If you're interested in that, of course, do keep in mind that you will most likely be left wanting more, as I have been. So we'll have to see how that goes. But overall, very quality book. That is Legend of the Galactic Heroes, Volume 1, Dawn, by Yoshiki Tanaka. And yeah, I guess that's really all I have to say. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please subscribe if you want more, and leave down in the comments if you like this type of video. I've never really done a book review before, but I really wanted to try something new. So please let me know what you think about that, and I'll see you guys next time.